Hello, and thanks for joining us on the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Gen Con and the gaming capital of the world, this is The Established Facts. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Established Facts. Before we get into our topic today, let's go ahead and introduce everyone at the table, starting to my right.
Oh, so that's me. It's Josh.
Hi, Josh. This is Rager, a.k.a. Jeremy.
Hi, Josh. This is Derek.
And from sunny Florida,
this is Anton.
and your host, as temporarily, is Big Don. So we thought it would be kind of fun for the five of us to discuss kind of how we as GMs or as just general gamers have gotten the opportunity to introduce new people into gaming. So for our versus topic, we're going to start out with discussing kind of our strategy. So are you the kind of person who would rather have a noob observe a game that you are trying to teach them or participate in a game? So observation versus participation. So we'll go ahead and start with Derek.
I'm not sure. Participate.
Mr. I have 12 stories going on in a single session.
Well, yeah, I can do that easily because I've broken you all. But, yeah, I would say participate.
There's a lot of malicious behavior behind this. I'm going to say participate as well.
I'm going to have to say participate.
Anton?
I'm definitely going to have to say observe.
All right. Well, I, as well, am going to have to say participate. And for those of you who have ever gamed with me and have seen me introduce new people to gaming, I usually don't allow people to just sit at my table and not do anything. So normally if I'm running an RPG game, it's throwing together a character for somebody so they can actually sit and learn how to play the game. Or if it's a board game, just giving them a character, or at least allowing them to sit and share the experience with whoever they are attending with or what have you. So, with all that being said, Tony, you happen to be the only one who said you would prefer someone who would observe the game before they started participating. Tell us why.
In the experience that I've got, at least the people that I've brought into gaming, it's been mostly people who really haven't done anything other than console gaming. So bringing these people into board game or tabletop games and RPGs, for the first game, a lot of times I say observe first off, but it's a lot of it for me is is usually half and half. They'll half observe the first game and then play later in the game. But the thing about it is, for me, is I want to make sure they're comfortable with what's going on or with how things roll before we just throw them in the deep end. Because I have personally had experiences where being thrown in the deep end wasn't the best. And it wasn't the type of game that I liked, and I didn't have a good time. So having somebody observe the style of game, especially when they're new to the genre, so new to RPG dice rolling pen and paper games, when they've never played before, is something that I think observation is a good start.
Do you think that even if they haven't played video games or board games like the adventure card game that I'm staring at right now, or RPGs, do you think that it's still observe rather than participate?
Yes, very much so. If they're not if they're basically a new gamer, brand new to all types of gaming, I still think they should observe, because it lets them kind of take a 10,000 foot overview of what's going on, so they can understand. Okay, this is what's going on in the game. You're rolling dice. You're figuring out what's on the sheet. You're You're preparing what you're going to do. You're thinking of strategies. You're doing this, that, and the other. It lets them get into that ideal of that kind of mindset before they are thrown into their first game, and then not knowing what to do or what they need to do. It kind of is a half refresher, half preparation course before going into doing something for the first time.
That kind of goes along with my mindset. Instead of just forcing somebody to participate, I'd much rather prefer them approach me and ask with interest, hey, what's this game about? I know because GameStop's opened up some board games within their library that some of the employees there have been asking me and my friend, hey, what are these board games like? And I've been showing my friend who had some interest prior to that some of the basic board games like Dominion or Settlers of Catan, and with that there's been a growing interest within that community of, hey, what are these other board games?
I think a lot of it has to come down to the person you're talking to, though. We've had a lot of players in our group who are very much the shy type, so observing works really well with the shy type of player, because it allows them to see what's going on and kind of make a decision for themselves. But we also have a lot who, though they may be shy, also get bored really easily. So if you don't put them into the game and say, look, you're going to play, get in, let's see what it's like, by doing it, they'll lose interest faster if they're not involved.
There won't be a connection to it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's why I was saying the half and half. A lot of times with the people that I try to bring in is to start them out as observers so they can get an idea of what's going on, and then get them into the game later.
I think for me, in general, and I kind of, gave a little bit of my opinion right before Tony gave us his. But for me, I never try and strong arm anybody into playing a game that they're not familiar with or that they're not comfortable with playing. Normally, for me, I am a tactile learner, and so when I want to learn a new game, I will watch a YouTube video, or I will sit down with friends who know how to play the game, and I will have them teach me the game, because me sitting down and reading, I can read the rules manual 2 or 3 times without getting the full grasp of how the mechanics of a game work. But if I can sit down with someone who knows how to play the game, and they say, this is the basic strategy, these are the basic cards, or this is the basic pieces, or these are the mechanics of the game at its simplest form, and then you can customize it to however you want to play. For example, recently I played Civilization, the board game, and it was a lot of fun. I had never really played a game like that, where there are so many different ways to win, and everyone has an opportunity to kind of make their own path as to the victory in that game. And so it was kind of neat to be able to sit down and dissect it with Mike, our host, and he really gave us a good general foundation of how the game mechanics work. And then as we went on, the players at the board got better and better at understanding how the mechanics were working in their favor, or how maybe they should have made a different decision earlier in the game and why it had affected them. And I think what I really enjoy about having that sort of tactile relationship to a game, and what I try and encourage players who I'm teaching new games to do, is to, at the end of the game, kind of discuss, how did you feel about the game? What would you do differently if we sat down and played it again? Because that tends to be the kind of conversations that I have with my friends that are common gamers, but maybe we're playing a new game. You know, in this situation, we're kind of talking about people who maybe they've never, or maybe they're only console gamers. They have no experience sitting down at a table and playing a social game. Jeremy, I did want to ask, for the most part, you know, most of us at the table, we game together fairly exclusively. I mean, obviously, we all have kind of friends and people that we work with outside of that we game with and stuff. But I think Jeremy, more so than anybody, you have a whole nother set of gamer buddies as well outside of kind of this group here. So when you guys are introducing new people to games and things like that, like what's kind of the tactic and who usually takes the lead in that kind of a thing?
Well, a group that I know that's kind of on the south side is the one that I'm going to think of here. The way that they do it is they kind of have a get-together every other week on Mondays, and there's generally some kind of a food that's being prepared. Either we'll chip in for pizza, or last time there was a lot of chili that was made up. And so it's primarily a way of let's hang out, catch up on what's going on, and there will be this, you know, subtle aspect of gaming in the background. And every game that we've played has been a game that I've never heard of. So it's just, you know,
it's more of a social, hey, let's hang out, chat, catch up, things like that while we're playing a game.
Yeah. And it's usually like really easy to get into games. Like Werewolf was the first one we tried out. There was something about a princess. It's a little card game where you go around the table and whoever has the highest card at the end of the ballroom dance, I guess, wins the princess heart. Love Letter, I think is what it's called.
Okay, I have not played that, but I've definitely heard of it.
That one's an extremely quick game.
Okay.
And then there's also been Cyclades, Eclipse. Those were both longer games, but they were really, really good to get into because they kind of introduced more aspects of, like, here's the worker payment placement system, and then Eclipse was kind of the transition of a sci-fi computer game into a board game. And so it was an interesting way to mix kind of a genre.
Well, Derek, I know that you've also had, especially recently, you've had several people from your work kind of, you know, they started playing role-playing games with us and things like that. I think you have a coworker that plays in one of your Pathfinder games. And
yes.
So when you're in a situation where maybe they're not the newest person in the world to gaming. Of course, I've not gotten a chance to actually sit in on the session that he plays in, but when you're introducing someone who maybe is from a completely different social facet in your life to something like gaming, because obviously we take work and we take gaming on a completely different level, like the passion behind one versus the other. So when you're sitting down with a coworker or somebody like that, and I know Jeremy has experience with this too, because several of the coworkers that you have are gamers as well. But what's kind of the method behind kind of getting them into not only the game but also the group and things like that? Because obviously you're introducing them normally to 2 or 3 or 4 people that they've never met.
This was actually very easy. I didn't have to do anything really.
Okay.
I talked to him beforehand at work about it, and he was very interested. So it was literally him sitting down and starting to game with us. So it was actually pretty nice and easy. He built a good character. He's in a very strong group. So yeah, there wasn't anything. Did you find any weirdness about him joining?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, because Jeremy's in that group.
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to point out, though, with regards to observation or participation, is one of the risks you have of having somebody observe something especially one of our games, or our types of games, not us as a group, is that they can be complicated, and observers could easily get lost in the 5 gajillion pieces that Fantasy Flight has for a board game.
Oh my gosh.
Or the complex character sheet for Pathfinder or something like that. So it's you do run that risk of, okay, I'm an outsider and I'm not sure what's important that's going on and what's not important, and how do I boil this down. What you're seeing, like if someone observed us as a group playing a role-playing game, they'd see us rolling in dice and like saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and like us flipping pages, and like they'll be like, geez, I can never do that. So it's, in my opinion, it would be best to give them something like a fighter or a barbarian and say, okay, look, this is how you do it. All of the numbers are right here. All you have to do is add this number to what you roll.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so this actually came up, the Fantasy Flight reference. My buddy from work, he was running a game over at Game Paradise, which is, again, on the south side. And the way that we had this set up is it was a BSG game. The setup was already done when we got there, and we went through character selection, did kind of the first churn, and another person sat down and was interested in watching. And as the game progressed, it was just overwhelming to realize that there are a lot of cards. All of the cards have different abilities. There are a lot of pieces. You can be on the ship doing actions. You can be outside of the ship doing actions. You can be in like fighter combat outside of the ship. You have once per game abilities, and then there's this underlying aspect of a distrust between everybody. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it got to the point where they actually had vocalized this is really kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, I've had that vocalized to me several times, and I mean, if someone sat down and saw us put together the adventure card game, like set that up,
Oh my.
it would just completely terrify them. I mean, it takes like a half an hour to set that game up with all the different cards and
It's like the war game setup.
Oh god.
It takes forever.
Right.
Play takes forever.
Well, I think you know, what you guys are bringing up is really good, and I think that kind of gets us into more of our discussion topic on how do we get new people? How do we get, you know, whether they be just a niche style gamer where maybe they only play consoles or they only play PCs or things like that. How do we get someone, or maybe they have never gamed before, but they're really into Tolkien and they're really into C.S. Lewis and they want to check these kind of things out? How do we get someone like that interested and passionate about our hobby of gaming?
I got a great one for this.
Oh, go for it, Jeremy.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So when my coworker, who moved up from Florida, came into town, he has background in computer games, but never, at least as far as I was aware at the time, had any exposure to board games. But he was interested in going to Gen Con. So I kind of sat down, worked out through the schedule of, here's the stuff I normally try to do, and I pretty much helped plan the schedule of what he was doing around the same stuff I was doing, and gave him a good, exposure to a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, because they're the one-off sessions, and you can do, tons of different things at Gen Con. And then between events, be walking through the center location, the exhibit hall, and, you'll be able to observe for 5-minute stretches or so, oh, that's what this kind of game's like, that's what this kind of game's like. So Gen Con was a really great experience for him.
I would disagree to most people for that, because Gen Con would be overwhelming. Even going through especially going through the exhibit hall, because it's just packed in there. I have sort of, have sort of a different take on this because, and one of the reasons why I was interested in this topic is that my parents are going to be coming down at some point in the next 2 months.
Oh, very cool.
And I was talking to them, and I was like, look, I'm running 4 different games, and then I'm preparing to release my rule book, so I've got to run and play in like a whole bunch more. And they're like, I was like, do you want to see what I'm doing? And they were like, yes, I would like to see what you're doing. But
I know they're always asking you questions about that kind of stuff. When
they
you visit
are,
them.
yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, you can sit and watch. And I was like, so I have to think about it from that perspective as well. Whereas your guy had a predilection. He was like, look, I want to go to Gen Con. I already have...
There was some engagement there.
Right. What do you do about the people that have none?
Well, and I think that's a very good point to make, because obviously I'm a very outspoken person in general, and it's easy for me.
What?
Yeah, no, we can't get him to shut up.
It's easy for me to find other people that are very similar in that personality style.
Not here.
Not yet, right? But I will say what can be slightly daunting is when you're used to one style of player or one style of noob, if you will, and then you get somebody who's kind of a curveball. Mm-hmm. If you're used to people who are really enthusiastic about learning new things and getting into games, and maybe they have, like I said earlier, maybe they have kind of been the Tolkien, and I can remember Kayla, Mike's wife, Kayla. That's how I introduced her into gaming before she ever started gaming, because I started talking to her. I was like,
"Want to play fairy?"
Well, yeah, she had all these fairy stickers on her car,
yeah,
and she has a lot of friends who are gamers. And before they got married, I was talking to her. It was actually Josh and Deb's wedding, and I was like, "So, do you get into gaming and stuff?" She's like, "No, not really." And I was like, "You're telling me you have fairies hanging from your rear view mirror, and you're not into any sort of like fantasy gaming or anything?" "No, I like to read books." "What kind of books do you like to read?" And then she starts spilling out all these fantasy titles, and I'm like, okay, this is obviously a gamer in the making. She just needs to find the right game, and that's kind of always been my life principle, is to say everyone is a gamer in some way, shape, or form. They just have to find their right game. And if anyone's ever interested in learning a little bit more in depth of why I feel that way, please send me a message on Facebook, because I had a conversation with one of my instructors, who's a lawyer, doesn't play anything, and I put him into that perspective, and he was like, "Wow, I never thought about that way."
And that was really important, is to find the right game,
right? And that's what I was actually going to bring up, is
because it may not be like one of the Fantasy Flight games,
right?
It may be it may be Cards Against Humanity,
right? It may be
Leagues
apples
of
to
Legends.
apples.
Yeah.
Leagues of Legends was exactly like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I had to go through 12, I don't know, maybe 20 champions before I found somebody who's like, this is who I need to be.
Right.
And then I was engaged after that.
Exactly. And I think that's a big point in when you're teaching someone how to play a game. It's like you can't let your passion of being a gamer overwhelm them with what you're trying to teach them, because you're trying to open a door that can lead to several different roads.
Not run them over with a steamroller.
Exactly.
I will admit mistake and fault in this. My wife is not here. It is the biggest don't is to never introduce someone who is very much about being involved, especially a reader, into a game that has 5 years of history without being able to give them the entire history.
I would also say, for someone who is a very technical person, like your wife, do not get them involved in a game that has 95% house rule and 5% book
real rule. Yeah. However, I'll give Dawn the credit for this one. When he ran the Red Hand of Doom game and she gave it a second chance, she was able to get hooked, and obviously she's on our podcast and big-time role-play gamer now, but she was a board gamer and a console gamer beforehand, so it was a lot easier to open that up. Someone who was not as much, Avital Guernsey, She played in a one-off at our gaming ministry event about 2 years ago. Never played a role-playing game. Really hadn't sat down and played much gaming at all. Her brothers played video games, whatever. She wasn't much, but she was a reader-writer type.
I thought she started at Gen Con.
She went to Gen Con.
Yeah.
Because
right, she was the observer.
Right, she was an observer that year. The first game she played was that September, immediately following. And she played a gunslinger. That's why her first character in Dawn's game was a gunslinger. It was what she understood. And a lot of that for her, because of her, she's very creative mentality, and
she's a writer.
She's a writer. It was a lot easier for her to just jump right in because that's just the personality she is. But then we have others who carry. Though she is easily distracted, she was better off first starting watching.
Yeah.
And watching a couple of different times to make sure she would feel comfortable being in the environment. Now, granted, she got wrapped into that big, long existing game first and probably got scared away because of that. But it comes down to the person. You really got to understand the person. Have the conversations. Be open to the possibility that the gamer you're trying to pull out may not be the same gamer that you are. That's
exactly.
the passion you were trying to...
Exactly.
Don actually...
I was going to make a point throughout all this. So that's also something you got to think about when you're talking to one of these people who you're either coaxing into gaming because they've got that kind of mindset, or who have shown interest. And what is...
He's shotgunning.
Yeah.
Visual
Sorry,
things
Jeremy.
on a radio podcast. It's always good.
I'm distracted.
But one thing that you really got to keep in mind is you've got to talk to these people before you start playing these games, so you kind of get a basic sense of what they're looking for. So you can make your judgments about, okay, this person is a very outgoing, a very engaged type person. They're really not going to be an observation type person. So let's put them in the game and roll with it from there. Or this person's more reserved and more of a reader is a perfect type for kind of an observation type person in the background a lot of times. Just kind of watch and look and then get involved, but you got to read the person to figure out what type of situation to put them in.
Don, I think it was you that introduced the concept of having people role play as NPCs.
And actually, that was an idea that I got off of. I think it was maybe Fear the Boot.
Yeah, they've mentioned that.
Yeah, like just because it keeps the interest of the players at your table higher versus having when the party inevitably splits versus having those lulls in the gaming where half of your characters aren't doing anything and half of your characters are active in a situation where maybe they're in a town, they're in a tavern, they're in a store. You can just plug players in as NPCs that are not going to necessarily change the way that the game needs to go. But it adds a little bit of flavor to it, because obviously when you walk into a grocery store, 9 times out of 10, you're not the only one there. But when you're in a party with 5 or 6 other people and you walk into a store, it's always just your party and the shopkeeper. So,
how do you get people that would have a difficulty with playing a character involved with role-playing? Because, I mean, that's the benefit of board games, is that you don't have the additional aspect of you're like acting.
one thing that I have started doing when I introduce someone to the concept of role-play gaming, because I think, honestly, role-play gaming is probably one of the more difficult styles of gaming to describe to someone. When you're talking about the war game, you're talking about a 7x3 foot board with pieces all over it, like Risk. It's a lot more advanced, but that's, if you can explain Risk to somebody, you can explain the concept of what the war game is. If you can explain, apples to apples, or even like a game like Euchre or something, you can kind of work your way into playing other card games in that are more in that like gamer niche arena. But when it comes to role-play games, I tend and have recently really started using the terms like and I know we've used it several times before, but more of like cooperative storytelling. When I talk to people about what role playing is or what a role playing game is, it normally has to do with the concept of what you are doing, not necessarily because I think gaming a role play game is a misnomer, because when people think game, they think, well, after you play for 4 hours, you win, right? Well, no, that's not how a role playing game normally works. Normally,
Especially when Derek's running.
Right.
Right.
Well, normally it's one plot hook to the next plot hook,
And then I win.
right. Well, okay.
So,
And then
It's-
6
it's-
years later, we
right.
finally finish.
All right.
We just let him keep thinking he wins.
But what I try and do is I try and relate it to like people who are really into movies, and I say, okay, well, what's one of your favorite movies? And maybe they say Gone with the Wind. I say, okay, well, have you ever pretended like you were one of those characters, or have you ever read a book where you have really immersed yourself into a character? And they will say, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, I really understood where Magneto was coming in X-Men 3 The Last Stand, because I could see where he was, okay, cool. Well, that's basically what you're doing in a role-play game, is you're sitting down at a table and you're immersing yourself into this character concept that you have, and you're just using the mechanic of dice or cards or something like that to determine your success or your failure in the game. So don't let the dice or whatever the mechanic is to resolve conflicts, don't let that scare you away from taking the opportunity to sit down and really get into your character, because that's what roleplay is about. And I really try and just kind of string them along using a lot of that terminology, because I tend to feel like if you understand where your character is coming from, you can flub a lot of dice rolls.
and that's a good way to introduce a group of people that are completely brand new.
Right.
Is to pick a TV show or a
Yeah,
movie.
absolutely.
And that's how I did it with my coworkers in Vermont. Is I said, okay, well, do you guys know Lost, the TV show? And they were like, yes. So I was like, okay, well, that's perfect. Let's start with that, do a storyline within that universe, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
But don't expect it to be more mechanical rather than theatrical.
Right. Right.
And
Especially at first, because at first you're really trying to, you want the player to be immersed in the game, but you're also having to deal with those mechanical issues, like, okay, well, this is why you have to roll, and this is what you're rolling for.
Well, it's more
But-
than that. It's comfort level, because
Right.
it's people are like, oh, well, should I do this? Is it all right if I do that?
Right.
Those are the questions that will constantly
Absolutely.
come up.
I have kind of a question that obviously has to do with this topic, but Jeremy had mentioned earlier, GameStop has started carrying a lot more board games. And I have also noticed when I go in there, I'll even ask the people that are behind the desk if they've ever heard of several of the board games, and a lot of them will say no. But what I like about it is I've not had an experience where they're not interested in whatever those board games are. I had a conversation with a guy about what Zombicide was, because they that's one of the games that they carry at the GameStop that I frequent. So I think that's really cool, but I think that that's also a risk, because I feel like when you open the general population, because most people, when they go and buy their video games, which is, in my opinion, probably the largest percentage of quote-unquote gamers, are going to be console gamers. Most of them are going to go to a GameStop, or they're going to go to a Best Buy, or they're going to go to the mall, or they're going to go to Toys R Us, where there are other types of games there. And especially, I've noticed Walmart and GameStop are the two biggest proponents in this new movement of carrying niche gamer games. I saw they have Catan and Zombie Dice and several other games out at the local Walmart. So in general, how do you guys feel about? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Tony. I think he's got his hand up, or his head's tangled up in some headphones or something. But
If his face turns blue, we'll just watch.
there you go. But how do you guys?
Thanks, guys.
What do you guys feel are the strengths and weaknesses to places like GameStop vending board games outside of your friendly local game store.
Oh, crap.
Oh, jeez.
All right,
Jeez.
phone call.
Woo! Musical interlude.
Yep. All right. Cool.
So what are the benefits and the dangers of a store like that carrying games like that? Go ahead, Tony.
For me, it's got to be just exposure. Because a lot of times going into GameStop or places where, like, especially console gamers go to buy games, they're going to they're not, a lot. I'd probably say 50 to 75% of the time they're not going in there directly to buy a single game and leave. So they're going to browse the store, and they're going to see these things, and it's going to make them curious, and either they'll buy it on a whim, or they will go look it up and figure out, and then go back and get it. So it just kind of it opens things up.
That's me. Go ahead, Derek.
I mean, that's how a lot of us find a lot of these games is either somebody introduces us to them, or we go into a store and start browsing, and oh look, we walk out with 6 games.
2 things to that. I am a lot more pessimistic about.
No.
Yeah.
That's just in general.
Really?
Just in general, yes, I'm a very much a cynical person. But I don't think that those games are getting the browsing that people assume that they're getting, because people are going to go in there and say, I have a PS4, I have an Xbox One, and I have a PS3, and they're going to go to that wall and look at those games, and their eyes are just going to, like, completely skim over the board games.
There are actually 2 things that kind of support this. One is the way that the board games are being presented. Mm-hmm. They're generally in the corner on the floor. Mm-hmm. 2 is the employees there generally don't have much awareness or knowledge about the game itself. So both of those are causing them to lose sales. Mm-hmm. However, I would say that by just having them there will be people who go in and see something like that, and maybe they'll also be lucky enough to have a store where somebody has experience with those things. I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's where it should be.
And, well, I agree with that, but additionally, I think that they need to be careful about what types of board games that they sell. If someone who is like, I know Monopoly, I know I need even Risk, and I play my PS4, and then they suddenly get into something like Arkham Asylum, and they look at the setup of those games, they're going to be like, oh, you know what, this takes too much time, screw it, I'm going to...
Arkham Horror is one of those games that when I first saw it, I was confused because I'm a Batman fan. You find out later that Arkham Horror is actually something that is based in the Cthulhu universe and has absolutely nothing to do with Batman.
Right.
But if I ever saw that at a GameStop, you would think that would be a little confusing.
Yeah, I
right?
can see that.
Well, it's also you have to have some dedication for it, and I'm sorry to say this, but you plug in a video, you put in the disc to a video game, that's the amount of setup that you need to do. Versus, I've got to set aside the tiny cards, the medium-sized cards, the funny-looking cards, the item cards, the treasure cards, the door cards, the 50,000 different types of cards.
You must be playing Hero Quest.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, and for a lot of people who just don't have the patience for that, they're just going to be like, oh, geez, why did I just even buy this thing? So,
Tony?
But you're also going to get the flip side to that. You're going to get the people who are in the GameStop every week, and they know where everything's at in the store, and oh, that's something new. Let's go investigate that. You're going to have those kind of customers, because trust me, I've known many people who are like that. I believe one of them is sitting there with his arms behind his head.
It's true.
So you're going to have the people who have been in the store enough times that they gloss over things, but you're going to have the kind of customers that go, oh, that's something it's not normal. We're not used to it being there. Let's go see what that is. So you're going to have a greater chance of that happening. Plus, as it is typical with GameStop, you're going to have lines, and people are going to be just kind of looking around, browsing around when the lines are long. So that's another time when you're going to have people who are just kind of, half glossing over things, but still pseudo looking at things in the room.
Yeah, but how often does pseudo looking over things in the room turn to actual sales? And that's one of the hard truths that I've had come to when we were investigating the game store. I was like, oh, well, people just like look over stuff and then they buy it. And then a lot of the game store owners were like, no, they don't. They just pick it up, look at it, then put it back. And I was like, wow, that is really shocking and really, really like disheartening.
But do you know why that is? 9 times out of 10, it's because there's no engagement between the patron and the shop worker.
And we've already established that the shop worker at GameStop doesn't.
Well, that's
have...
right. Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure that they've inserted these games at GameStop because they were afraid that sales were going to go down with the new consoles, so they needed to bring in something else that may sell.
I think they have the concept that they want to open a couple extra doors for the retail of gaming, just in case. I mean, Jeremy, you had something you want to say?
I did. The part that I am optimistic about, however, is even when those games are purchased, and maybe that's a turnoff for whoever the person purchasing it is, it will go in a closet, collect dust perhaps, but that doesn't necessarily mean the children of those individuals won't find that and pick it up and be like, wow, this is pretty neat.
Or their friends. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have game like the war game that everyone keeps bringing up. I don't have even the slightest interest in playing it, though I'm pretty sure I will one day. Just to say I will. I've still got it because my wife wants to play it. My wife and her friends, a lot of you guys still want to play it, and that's okay. You know, it's still worth the purchase because somebody else might enjoy it.
When I do play the war game, because like you, I don't have interest, but I know I will do it at some point. It will be sponsored by Monster. So.
Yeah. So
Monster and Red Bull.
You know, that kind of brings me around to the question of game selection. So something that I have myself been attempting to do is, having 2 kids, I find that it's a lot easier when you have a game that you can set up, play, put away, and move on to the next game within an hour.
True.
King of Tokyo is very good about that. Zombie Dice is a really quick... that one
Munchkin
takes 15-20 minutes.
Munchkin's pretty good.
Munchkin is all right. It depends on your players.
Right.
And it depends on how many expansions you have in your Munchkin deck, Josh.
Yes.
Well,
I'm thinking just the base game.
If you have just the base game and you play with the recommended, I think it's 4 people, then yeah, I can definitely see a game of Munchkin only lasting an hour, maybe an hour 15, something like that. But I think that when you're introducing new people to new games, what I like to look at is simplicity in mechanics and a reduced amount of time, because very rarely are you going to find a brand new gamer who's willing to sit at a table for 4 hours to play the same game.
And I would hold off on the backstabbing type games.
Yeah.
Dominion's okay. Resident Evil, the deck builder, it's Dominion plus an extra mechanic, and the rule book is really bad.
Really surprised
I
that
can't think of...
Legendary has been awesome in terms of if you want to get somebody into a deck building game as well. That's if you remove the victory point condition, like we've done, because you eliminate the concept of trying to get the most points and go purely cooperative. Cooperative games are great for introducing
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The variant on Apples to Apples that has the black cards. I
Oh,
can't
Cards
think of
Against
what it's called.
Humanity.
Yeah, Cards
Cards
Against
Against Humanity.
Cards Against
Yeah.
Humanity. Yeah.
Yeah,
That one is good for
definitely.
some adults.
That is a good adult crowd game.
Yes.
16 or older, or 18 or older?
I would say 18.
or older.
Well, we'll
I
say-
would say at least 17.
when
if
we
not
were
18.
at Comic-Con, when I saw a couple kids that were younger come up, 16, 17, I looked them right in the face and said, "How old are you?" And 16. I went, "Okay, it's your parents' fault." That's exactly what I said. I said, "If you're going to sit down and play this game, you blame your parents.
And
it's
then
not my fault."
there were a couple other kids who were walking around the area, and they expressed interest, but their parents were able to take in the setting.
The environment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, we'll come back to this one later, maybe.
Yeah.
AKA no.
It's a really fun game.
it is.
But that is
Awesome game.
you know, I will say this: what a game like Cards Against Humanity or Apples to Apples does bring is it brings a comfort level with people who are gamers and people who aren't, because you can all meet on the same level. You can play. You can learn people's personalities and where their humor level is, and really it opens more doors to other games.
Going back to
It's
that
a gateway
whole,
drug of gaming.
It is.
going back to that whole weekly meeting that I have on the off weeks, they do poker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So poker, beer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, you're getting a little bit of, let's do generic card games, and then the following week, let's expand outside of the typical comfort zone.
What about the card? It's not a card game. It's the one with the goblins that had a Kickstarter.
Kobolds Ate My Baby?
Yes, Kobolds, yes.
Yeah, Kobolds Ate My Baby is a great role-playing game for teaching people because it's really easy to learn. However, again, you have to keep kind of a lighthearted mentality about it. I mean, it's titled Kobolds Ate My Baby. You are playing little furry kobolds
Oh, well,
who go
then what
around
about
eating
the
babies.
other non-GM
All Hell
one?
King Tor.
The non-cheat.
That's right.
Oh,
All
Fiasco?
Fiasco.
Yeah, Fiasco's another really good one as well, but
Yeah.
that one requires, depending on which way you play it, if you play it the full out, it requires a lot of input and a lot of interaction between people.
Deb's one. Quack in the Box.
Quack in the Box is a good
Oh
one too.
gosh, that one is pretty good.
That's a really good crossover game. Like,
Yeah.
For just kind of being one of those games where you just like pull it out of your bag and you're like, hey, let's sit down and play this, and you don't have to be a real like super gamer in order to sit down and learn and play and have a good time.
Yeah.
with it.
If you
One-
want,
But
Sorry.
Go ahead. If
Flux is another one.
Flux,
Flux
yeah.
is a good one. If you want a good introduction to RPGs, then a crossover is the adventure card game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pathfinder Adventure card game is good. The other ones for obviously, we've expressed how we feel about 4th Ed versus Pathfinder, but whatever. But the Dungeons and Dragons adventure board games,
They are really good.
amazing. They are really good. They're really easy, and they're cooperative in a sense because you are playing as a team, but you are also playing your own and other people's individual GMs. So you're running their monsters, and you're running your character.
Didn't you say earlier that the adventure card game had a really long setup time, though?
It does.
But if you're playing it with someone that knows it really well, then you can have that set up before people come
Yeah,
in.
Absolutely.
And that's the way that would do it. And what I'm thinking about with this is, okay, you've got a gamer or a new gamer, and you're trying to transition them from like board games, which is an easier type of intro, into RPGs.
Yeah. 2 games that I've played very recently that, in my opinion, and I mentioned one already, but in my opinion are really good entry-level games are King of Tokyo and Forbidden Island.
I've heard of that.
Oh yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one where the island
The
falls
island
apart.
tiles are sinking and things
Yeah.
like that. The mechanics are really simple. It's a really fun game. It's cooperative. And so it gives you the opportunity to kind of sit, strategize, and it's not a long game. It's 45 minutes or so. It's under an hour.
I'd like to do an exercise if you guys wouldn't mind. So my parents are coming
Uh-huh.
in a couple of months. My father's played a couple of Avalon Hill games.
Okay.
Okay.
And for those,
House on the Hill.
House on Haunted Hill is so good.
We primarily played like Past Lives. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
I have.
It's a very interesting game. But if you were to take those older people, 50s, 60s, and say, okay, you have a day of gaming, how would you go about it? And one of that is you're going to watch or even lightly participate in a Pathfinder RPG. How would you do it?
Maybe if anyone, any of our fans or listeners out there have any ideas, feel free to add in your comments here as well.
Absolutely.
I would say I would start out with some introductory, like, especially if your goal is to eventually work them into a role-playing game, start out with a Dungeons & Dragons adventure board game, or start out with a Pathfinder role-playing card game or adventure card game, so that they can kind of experience the terminology and the light mechanics of that style of game. But I wouldn't linger too heavy on it, because then you can always go back and relate back to playing that game. But if you play a lot of games that are very lighthearted, which King of Tokyo is a very lighthearted, a lot of fun game.
We got an elder at our church to play King of Tokyo.
Yeah, he loved it. And it's nice too, because you're playing a game where my dad is in his early 50s now, and of course when he grew up, Godzilla movies were all the rage and monster movies were all the rage. It's really easy to relate to somebody who's in their 50s and 60s, or even a little bit older. Do you remember those old cheesy Godzilla movies? Okay, well, you're playing that monster.
Oh, yeah.
And you are taking over Tokyo, and the way you do that is you roll these dice, and then it's a very
it's Yahtzee meets Kaiju.
It really is. It really is. But I would say, sit down and maybe intermix some, I guess, the tongue-in-cheek terminology, the Ameritrash games with some of the more niche gamer-style games. I really feel like, especially if you get somebody who is open-minded about gaming, Catan is another really fun game to learn. It's not hard, especially if you're into resource management games like Monopoly.
The newer ones do a lot better job about setup as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a ton of pieces. There's not, I guess it just depends. If you can get them hooked with a couple of good games early, then normally it seems to be their comfort level is a lot higher, and you can test out some of those games.
Things can be a bit more forgiving.
Right. And then I would say maybe make an evening of it, start around 6 or 7 o'clock, do like a dinner thing, or even if you just order pizza or something like that, and then sit down with a couple of friends and your parents and say, hey, we're gonna play a one-shot role-playing game. I want you guys to experience what this is about. It's going to be really easy. Make sure you have people there that if they have questions, they can answer them very easily. And then, just make it a real lighthearted game. One thing that I've done at Gen Con several times running a one-shot is if I don't have anything laid out or planned, I'll just run just a real goofy game. Just have fun with it. Who cares if you don't have everything written down? As long as you have an understanding of the rules and you have dice to roll, that's all you really need. So, and then if they get hooked,
I think that it would be... I think for that day, it would be really cool to do something like the D&D or Pathfinder adventure card game. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then go on to something like a one-shot of USS.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do that.
And that may even be a little bit easier for them to understand, because you're running off of a different style of success and failure ratio or determination, I should say.
One of the things that I'm interested about, I guess, with that is I'd be the type of person where, as I'm getting engaged, I would want it to be, environmental. So having like mood music to like accentuate the battles, or hey, you've entered a town. This is perhaps a theme.
I have
they
a
can
license to Sirenscape, which is the guys who were doing all the music during the big Gen Convention thing. So I could easily help set that up if you wanted to do something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think that it would be helpful because they've just asked so many questions, especially with as much as I've done with it. It would be good for them to understand what's going on. And it would be good because you guys would be playing in something that you would be running later on.
Out of curiosity, do you think the theme music or thematic elements like that would break the lighthearted mood?
I think if you're purely running a one shot, and it depends on what style of one shot you want to run. Really,
it would be distracting.
It could be if you keep it light enough, if you keep it low enough, just the ambient music. I feel like
It's a lot better than having a movie.
right.
That helps.
I was thinking you could sit down and put on The Hobbit, but then it's like, well, now I want to watch The Hobbit.
Yeah.
You could do something like that. But I think that if you want an element, if you want to kind of increase the comfort level of the environment, the music is a really good way to do that.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's kind of a good wrapping up point there for this topic. Really good discussion. Do we have any last minute plugs for this episode? I've got two.
Fear the Charity, please make sure you go to the website, take a look at that, fearthecharity.org, or of course on theestablishedfacts.com, we have a page for it. Don't forget to comment on the facebook.com
Yes, please.
The Established Facts.
Please.
We are on Google Plus as well, at Plus The Established Facts, Twitter at NDTEF, and of course the Fear the Boot forums for you booters out there. Look us up. Please don't be afraid to message us in any fashion. We're always up for ideas, conversations, whatever. I know we haven't had a big knockdown drag out like Video Game Madness, but we are at 147 likes on Facebook, which is pretty good for us. We're in the
We didn't have any Indiana teams in the tournament this year anyway.
No, we didn't, and whatever. And of course, Fear the Con in June. PopCon at the end of May. There ain't knock off 2 years.
Haha.
Sorry about that.
That's right.
You're going up against the king of plugs.
I am. I'm telling you, man.
I should have looked at you instead of him.
Well, the Established Facts at least will definitely be at PopCon this year in some way. I know I have a press badge. We're still discussing, and hopefully with help from fans or whatever.
Yeah, definitely
discussing the possibility of getting a booth, which. I know of at least one other podcast, Crit Confirm Entertainment. They're a co-worker of mine. They have started their own podcast up, and they're heavily involved with PopCon.
If there are any conventions in your area that you'd like us to attend to, post us a message on Facebook or any of our
yeah, I mean, we
sites.
can at least look into it and stuff like that. I know one thing that we have been trying to do over the last, I guess it'll almost be a complete 3 years here in a few months, working on year 4. But one thing that we've really tried to make kind of a passion is kind of exactly what we talked about today, is kind of getting out the word of what gaming is all about and talking to new people. And conventions are a really good opportunity to do that. You have situations where your coworkers invite you to a con, and you get a chance to kind of experience what that hobby is about. Without being super committed. And
you don't even have to go there. I mean, I know that every time that Gen Con or Comic Con was here,
just sit outside.
My coworkers were like, "Geez, look at all the people that are there."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Also, GamerX 2 is happening in July.
In July,
I will be there, and I will have a booth there. The X2 Kickstarter is still going for another week. Oh, actually, it will be finished by the time we release this, so sad face.
Well, it comes out Monday.
Right.
Yeah, we'll drop this in a couple days. Okay, so it's still on for a few more days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make sure you check it out on Kickstarter.
Definitely.
Silver Crescent Publishing, their Kickstarter, of course, they were out here. Don't forget about them as well.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Did I just strip all of your...
You took my... Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, for those of you who are in the Indy area or in the surrounding area, if you got a chance to go to Indiana Comic Con, which, in my opinion, was a huge success. I know that there were a lot of things that they got to work out, but it was the first year for their con.
We apparently blew them away.
Yeah, I mean, they're tripling at least, minimum. I've heard possibly quadrupling, but they're at least tripling the space that they had this year for next year, which is going to be great. They had 1 exhibit hall in the convention center. Next year it'll be 3. So that's awesome. That's exciting.
They might as well just get the whole thing and just be done with it.
Well, but it's a local. I mean, it's a local con, and you can't. I mean, they're not Gen Con. They can't just drop,
That much
millions
money.
of dollars on the entire convention center.
It's a build-up process.
So yeah, I mean, and I think here in a future episode we're going to kind of talk about big cons versus little cons and some of the do's and don'ts that we have
Foreshadowing?
experienced. Yeah, well, just a preview.
We'll just have to start our own convention.
That's
what
right.
That is.
That's right. But Indie PopCon, for those of you who are in the area, May 30th through June 1st, please make sure you get there. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's some really good people that are going to be showing up for guests of honor. I know that they're going to have a costume contest. They're going to have all kinds of gaming and stuff like that. If you are in the St. Louis area, or if you are a booter and you're planning on being at Fear the Con, we will see you there. I am signed up to run 2 events, and then I think I'm going to be drinking for the other 4. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously,
You've got that overnight thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do.
Don't
Yeah.
make sure that when you're drinking that you don't go.
well, I didn't say what I'd be drinking. I'll
Okay.
probably start with a beer and then end with a monster.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
kill myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, obviously coming in August, we got Gen Con and GamerX in July, and a lot of good stuff going on.
If you guys
check
are
out
in the area, just come find us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Please make sure if you are on Facebook, check out our Facebook post. I actually put that up the other day because we're really interested in some feedback. We want to get our application in for the Ennies because we think we got a good shot, and at least I do. We'll see. I may be the only one voting, so that's okay. Anyhow, without further ado, now that we've plugged everything in the world, the old fact, or our last fact, I should say, with Silver Crescent, it's slightly wordy, but it's okay. I like it. It doesn't matter if you're worried about stat blocks or worried about the story. If the setting is correct and the players love it, with a little bit of color and a little bit of flash, anybody can back a Kickstarter.
It's true.
That's right.
It's true. Yep.
So, for our new fact, and I'm really hoping that Mike is here for our next episode, but if he's not, it's okay, because I think I might be the only one who can actually read this one because of the way I wrote it. Through observation and participation, a new player needs motivation and preparation before they share in the elation and celebration of the socialization of our vocation.
You're complaining about wordiness of the last one?
Our vocation, you get paid for this?
No, not yet. We'll see.
We can only hope.
That's right.
One day.
Anyhow,
I'm going to call you Humphrey Appleby.
yeah, right? So, thank you again so much for listening to The Established Facts, and we will see you next time.
Toodles.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please visit us at www.theestablishedfacts.com and our Facebook page, facebook.com/theestablishedfacts. If you would like to support us by buying some merchandise, visit cafepress.com/castingrobot.
Bonus